Part 2 of Chapter 13 of Fanny Herself. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Fanny Herself by Edna Ferber. Chapter 13, Part 2. There was nothing spectacular about the welcome she got on her return to the office after this first trip. A firm that counts its employees by the thousands and its profits in the tens of millions cannot be expected to draw up formal resolutions of thanks when a heretofore flabby department begins to show signs of red blood. Ella Monahan said, "They'll make light of it, all but Fenger. That's their way." Slosson drummed with his fingers all the time she was giving him the result of her work in terms of style, material, quantity, time, and price. When she had finished, he said, "Well, all I can say is we seem to be going out of the mail order business and into the imported novelty line, de luxe. I suppose by next Christmas the grocery department will be putting in artichoke hearts and truffles, and French champagne by the keg for community orders." To which Fanny had returned sweetly, "If Oregon and Wyoming show any desire for artichokes and champagne, I don't see why we shouldn't." Fenger, strangely enough, said little. He was apt to be rather curt these days, and almost irritable. Fanny attributed it to the reaction following the strain of the Christmas rush. One did not approach Fenger's office except by appointment. Fanny sent word to him of her return. For 2 days she heard nothing from him. Then the voice of the snuff-brown secretary summoned her. She did not have to wait this time, but passed directly through the big, bright outer room into the smaller room. The powerhouse, Fanny called it. Fenger was facing the door. "Missed you," he said. "You must have," Fanny laughed, "with only 9,999 to look after." "You look as if you'd been on a vacation instead of a test trip." "So I have. Why didn't you warn me that business, as transacted in New York, is a series of social rites? I didn't have enough white kid gloves to go round. No one will talk business in an office. I don't see what they use offices for, except as places in which to receive their mail. You utter the word 'business,' and the other person immediately says 'lunch.' No wholesaler seems able to quote you his prices until he has been sustained by half a dozen Cape Cods. I don't want to see a restaurant or a rose silk shade for weeks." Fenger tapped the little pile of papers on his desk. "I've read your reports. If you can do that on lunches, I'd like to see what you could put over in a series of dinners." "Heaven forbid," said Fanny fervently. Then, for a very concentrated 15 minutes, they went over the reports together. Fanny's voice grew dry and lifeless as she went into the figures. "You don't sound particularly enthusiastic," Fenger said, when they had finished, "considering that you've accomplished what you set out to do." "That's just it," quickly. "I like the uncertainty. It was interesting to deal directly with those people, to stack one's arguments and personality and mentality and power over theirs until they had to give way. But after that, well, you can't expect me to be vitally interested in gross lots and carloads and dating." "It's part of business." "It's the part I hate." Fenger stacked the papers neatly. "You came in June, didn't you?" "Yes." "It has been a remarkable 8 months' record, even at Haynes Cooper's, where records are the rule. Have you been through the plant since the time you first went through?" "Through it? Goodness, no. It would take a day." "Then I wish you'd take it. I like to have the heads of departments go through the plant at least twice a year. You'll find the 14th floor has been cleared and is being used entirely by the selectors. The manufacturer's samples are spread on the tables in the various sections. You'll find your place ready for you. You'll be amused at Daly's section. He took your suggestion about trying the blouses on live models instead of selecting them as he used to. You remember you said that one could tell about the lines and style of a dress merely by looking at it, but that a blouse is just a limp rag until it's on? It's true of the flimsy Georgette things women want now. They may be lovely in the box, and hideously unbecoming when worn. If Daly's going for the higher grade stuff, he can't risk choosing unbecoming models." "Wait until you see him," smiled Fenger, "sitting there like a sultan while the pinks and blues and whites and plaids parade before him." He turned to his desk again. "That's all, Miss Brandeis. Thank you." Then, at a sudden thought, "Do you know that all your suggestions have been human suggestions? I mean, they all have had to do with people. Tell me, how do you happen to have learned so much about what people feel and think in such a short time?" The thing that Clarence Hale had said flashed through her mind, and she was startled to find herself quoting it. "It hasn't been a short time," she said. "It took 1,000 years." And left Fenger staring, puzzled. She took next morning for her tour of the plant as Fenger had suggested. She went through it, not as the startled, wide-eyed girl of 8 months before had gone, but critically, and with a little unconscious air of authority. For this organization, vast though it was, actually showed her imprint. She could have put her finger on this spot and that, saying, "Here is the mark of my personality." And she thought as she passed from department to department, 10,000 a year if you keep on as you've started. Up one aisle and down the next. Bundles, bundles, bundles. And everywhere you saw the yellow order slips. In the hands of the stock boys whizzing by on roller skates. In the filing department. In the traffic department. The very air seemed jaundiced with those clouds of yellow order slips. She stopped a moment, fascinated, as always, before the main spiral gravity chute down which the bundles, hundreds of them, thousands of them daily, chased each other to what? Fanny asked herself. She knew vaguely that hands caught these bundles halfway and redirected them toward the proper channel, where they were assembled and made ready for shipping or mailing. She turned to a stock boy. "Where does this empty?" she asked. "Floor below," said the boy, "on the platform." Fanny walked down a flight of iron stairs, and around to face the spiral chute again. In front of the chute, and connected with it by a great metal lip, was a platform perhaps 12 feet above the floor, and looking very much like the pilot's deck of a ship. A little flight of stairs led up to it, very steep stairs, that trembled a little under a repetition of shocks that came from above. Fanny climbed them warily, gained the top, and found herself standing next to the girl whose face had gleamed out at her from among those thousands in the crowd pouring out of the plant. The girl glanced up at Fanny for a second, no, for the fraction of a second. Her job was the kind that permitted no more than that. Fanny watched her for one breathless moment. In that moment she understood the look that had been stamped on the girl's face that night, the look that had cried, "Release." For this platform, shaking under the thud of bundles, 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 was the stomach of the Haynes Cooper plant. 60% of the 45,000 daily orders passed through the hands of this girl and her assistants. Down the chutes swished the bundles, stamped with their section mark, and here they were caught deftly and hurled into one of the dozen conveyors that flowed out from this main stream. The wrong bundle into the wrong conveyor? Confusion in the shipping room. It only took a glance of the eye and a motion of the arms. But that glance and that motion had been boiled down to the very concentrated essence of economy. They seemed to be working with fury, but then, so does a pile driver when you get the simplicity of it. Fanny bent over the girl, it was a noisy corner, and put a question. The girl did not pause in her work as she answered it. She caught a bundle with one hand, hurled one into a conveyor with the other. 7 a week, she said, and deftly caught the next slithering bundle. Fanny watched her for another moment, then she turned and went down the steep stairs. "None of your business," she said to herself, and continued her tour. "None of your business." She went up to the new selectors floor, and found the plan running as smoothly as if it had been part of the plant system for years. The elevator whisked her up to the top floor, where she met the plant's latest practical fad, the new textile chemist, a charming youth disguised in bone-rimmed glasses, who did the honors of his little laboratory with all the manner of a Harvard host. This was the fusing oven for silks. Here was the drying oven. This delicate scale weighed every ounce of the cloth swatches that came in for inspection, to get the percentage of wool and cotton. Not a chance for the manufacturer to slip shoddy into his goods now. Said Fanny politely. She hated complicated processes that had to do with scales and weights and pounds and acids. She crossed over to the administration building and stopped at the door marked Mrs. Knowles. If you had been an employee of the Haynes Cooper Company and had been asked to define Mrs. Knowles' position, the chances are you would have found yourself floundering, wordless. Haynes Cooper was reluctant to acknowledge the need of Mrs. Knowles. Still, when you employ 10,000 people, and more than half of these are girls, and 50% of these girls are unskilled, ignorant, and terribly human, you find that a Mrs. Knowles saves the equivalent of 10 times her salary in wear and tear and general prevention. She could have told you tragic stories, could Mrs. Knowles, and sordid stories, and comic, too. She knew how to deal with terror, and shame, and stubborn silence, and hopeless misery. Gray-haired and motherly? Not at all. An astonishingly young, pleasingly plumpish woman, with nothing remarkable about her except a certain splendid calm. 4 years out of Vassar, and already she had learned that if you fold your hands in your lap and wait, quietly, asking no questions, almost anyone will tell you almost anything. "Hello," called Fanny. "How are our morals this morning?" "Going up," answered Esther Knowles, "considering that it's Tuesday. Come in. How's the infant prodigy? I lunched with Ella Monahan, and she told me your first New York trip was a whirlwind. Congratulations." "Thanks. I can't stop. I haven't touched my desk today. I just wanted to ask you if you know the name of that girl who has charge of the main chute in the merchandise building." "Good Lord, child, there are thousands of girls." "But this one's rather special. She is awfully pretty, and rather different looking. Exquisite coloring, a discontented expression, and a blouse that's too low in the neck." "Which might be a description of Fanny Brandeis herself, barring the blouse," laughed Mrs. Knowles. Then, at the startled look in Fanny's face, "Do forgive me, and don't look so horrified. I think I know which one you mean. Her name is Sarah Sapinsky. Yes, isn't it a pity? And it's queer that you should ask me about her, because I've been having trouble with that particular girl." "Trouble?" "She knows she's pretty, and she knows she's different, and she knows she's handicapped, and that accounts for the discontented expression. That and some other things. She gets 7 a week here, and they take just about all of it at home. She says she's sick of it. She has left home twice. I don't blame the child, but I've always managed to bring her back. Some day there'll be a third time, and I'm afraid of it. She's not bad. She's really rather splendid, and she has a certain dreadful philosophy of her own. Her theory is that there are only two kinds of people in the world, those that give and those that take. And she's tired of giving. Sarah didn't put it just that way, but you know what she means, don't you?" "I know what she means," said Fanny grimly. So it was Sarah she saw above all else in her trip through the gigantic plant. Sarah's face shone out from among the thousands. The thud-thud of Sarah's bundle chute beat a dull accompaniment to the hum of the big hive, above the rustle of those myriad yellow order slips, through the buzz of the busy mail room, beneath the roar of the presses in the printing building, the crash of the dishes in the cafeteria, ran the lead motif of Sarah at 7 a week. Back in her office once more, Fanny dictated a brief observation report for Fenger's perusal. "It seems to me there's room for improvement in our card index file system. It's thorough, but unwieldy. It isn't a system any more. It's a ceremony. Can't you get a corps of system sharks to simplify things there?" She went into detail and passed on to the next suggestion. "If the North American Cloak and Suit Company can sell mail order dresses that are actually smart and in good taste, I don't see why we have to go on carrying only the most hideous crudities in our women's dress department. I know the majority of our women customers wouldn't wear a plain, good-looking little blue serge dress with a white collar and some tailored buttons. They want cerise satin revers on a plum-colored foulard, and that's what we've been giving them. But there are plenty of other women living miles from anywhere who know what's being worn on Fifth Avenue. I don't know how they know it, but they do, and they want it. Why can't we reach those women as well as their shoddier sisters? The North American people do it. I'd wear one of their dresses myself. I wouldn't be found dead in one of ours. Here's a suggestion. Why can't we get Camille to design half a dozen models a season for us? Now don't roar at that, and don't think that the women on Western ranches haven't heard of Camille. They have. They may know nothing of Mrs. Pankhurst, and Lillian Russell may be a myth to them, but I'll swear that every one of them knows that Camille is a dressmaker who makes super dresses. She is as much a household word among them as Roosevelt used to be to their menfolks. And if we can promise them a Camille-designed dress for $7.85, which we could, then why don't we?" At the very end, to her stenographer's mystification, she added this irrelevant line: $7 a week is not a living wage. The report went to Fenger. He hurtled lightly over the first suggestion, knowing that the file system was as simple as a monster of its bulk could be. He ignored the third hint. The second suggestion amused, then interested, then convinced him. Within 6 months Camille's name actually appeared in the Haynes Cooper catalog. Not that alone. The Haynes Cooper Company broke its rule as to outside advertising, and announced in full-page magazine ads the news of the $7.85 gowns designed by Camille especially for the Haynes Cooper Company. There went up a nationwide shout of amusement and unbelief, but the announcement continued. Camille, herself a frump with a fringe, whose frocks were worn by queens and dancers and matrons with millions and debutantes. Camille, who had introduced the slouch, revived the hoop, discovered the sunset chiffon, had actually consented to design 6 models every season for the mail-order millions of the Haynes Cooper women's dress department, at a price that made even Michael Fenger wince. End of chapter 13.